Hello. Good afternoon.
Josh.
How's everyone?
Very well, thanks.
Hey, Josh.
Hi, everyone. You guys.
Hey.
I see the grand office. I see everyone. It's a great crowd. It's certainly not here for me.
We got some added star power tonight, Josh.
Hey, Nick.
Hi.
How are you? Board woman, I see you.
Oh my gosh, the spreadsheets.
We'll hold on until I know that the foxes I see are introducing, so we'll we'll wait a couple minutes. Whenever you're ready, Nick, we'll start.
Great. I think we're just waiting for Mayor Pete and then a few more guests. So just hang on, everybody, for another minute or two.
Perfect.
Want me to draw you again? Orange. Orange. You said the orange. Or whatever your favorite color. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Would everyone mind just muting your line if you've just joined? We're going to do a muting honor system on this one.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we've got our two-star guests with us. Mayor Pete, hi. Thanks so much for joining. And Congressman Gottheimer.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm going to let my better half kick us off. Michael, you want to welcome everyone?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure about the better half part, but we just want to thank everyone sincerely for being here at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or wherever you may be. I'm sure that some of you are suffering from Zoom and other sorts of fatigue these days, but it's obviously a critical time, and we really appreciate your support and I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to support Congressman Gottheimer and Mayor Buttigieg over the last few years, and think that they're really the kind of people that we need at this time. So I'll turn it back over to Nick to do a bit of a more formal intro, but we just really wanted to thank you all for being here, for your contributions of time and funds.
Thanks, Michael. So I think we're 99 days now to the election. So it's really go time. And so just to echo Michael's comments, we really appreciate everyone joining us in support of Josh this afternoon. You know, when we think back to 2016, which was just an absolutely brutal election day, you know, one of the only things that helped us get out of bed the next day was the fact that Josh became a congressman. And for those of you that are new to learning about Josh and his district, he beat an absolutely awful Tea Party Republican in 2016 and ran an unbelievable race, and was really one of the bright spots and one of the House seats that we were able to pick up in 2016. And now looking ahead to 2020, his is a seat that we really need to defend to keep the House majority. But also, you know, Josh has really demonstrated in the last 4 years that he belongs in Congress and that we need him there. Josh is like family to us. And so looking back to 2016, we would have supported him no matter. But we were really delighted to support him for a lot of the same reasons why we were so passionately, you know, on Mayor Pete's team heading into the 2020 election. You know, some things that both Josh and Pete share are, you know, in our minds, they really represent the best of what the Democratic Party has to offer for the next generation. And we really do believe it's important and also time for the next generation of leaders to step up and to bring a long-term mindset to what we need to do to get our country back on track. Another thing they both have in common is just an unbelievable work ethic. I've known Josh since he was 12 years old, and he is one of the hardest working, most dedicated people I've ever come across in politics and in life. And then, I'd also just say that, Josh, like Mayor Pete, just does a really wonderful job of reaching across the aisle, figuring out how to get things done, not by sacrificing or watering down his values, but by looking for common ground. And Josh has demonstrated that ability in what he's done in the Congress and helping to form the Problem Solvers Caucus and really trying to figure out how he can make a purple district solidly blue over the last 4 years. So thank you so much for joining us in support of Josh. He really needs and deserves our help. And a special thank you to Mayor Pete for taking the time to lend your support and your platform to this important New Jersey congressional race. So with that, Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Nick. And I think, Mayor, I don't know if you'd agree, but after the way Nick handled that, I think you're ready to run. I think you've got that down perfectly. You've made a good argument for how to be practical. Michael, get ready. It's no fun. But thank you both. I really, really appreciate it. And it's great to see so many friends and familiar faces. And thank you all for being here and for supporting me. And I said, Mayor, before you showed up, I said that obviously they're not here for me. It's very clear. But I'm equally excited to hear from you as everyone else is, and really grateful that you're spending time with us. And I think, if I had to get one more phone call from Nikki about how great you are, I don't think I could handle it. And it started early, you should know. I mean, the Foxes are big fans, including the kids and the extended family. So, I would hear about all the things that Nikki was talking about, which are, one, obviously, how smart you are and the Harvard-Oxford piece, but two, the service piece always, and how you have given so much to our country and how grateful we are for your service. And of course, as I'm not just talking about in the Navy, but also as mayor. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate that. And every time I watched you, felt the same thing, which is this is exactly somebody we need on the national stage who is both brilliant and also practical and wants to get things done. And the only way we're going to actually, I think, get things done and make sure that they last and they're enduring is by working together and bringing some civility back to this process. I'm in Washington this week, where we are obviously banging our head against the wall trying to get a deal done on COVID. And it's mind-boggling that we are so far apart on certain things that seem just so obvious. But that's how it is. But the key is you have to actually just keep at it. And many of us are still working on it. And you can either scream and yell and walk away, or you sit down at the table and keep it up until you get there. Where in fact, there's a group of us working and have been for the last month on the racial justice legislation, because again, it passed out of the House, but as Karen Bass and I talk about all the time, who's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, you can pass it and then it can sit on the shelf, or you can pass it and then work with the Senate and actually try to get something done. And she's very eager to get something done. And so many of us have been working to get it done. And I know that's the kind of leadership you've brought and will continue to bring. And obviously the sky's the limit for you. I'll just be stuck on doing Zoom calls. So with that, I will turn it over to a great American and someone I'm so grateful that you're here for, Mayor Pete.
Well, thanks for the kind introduction, and thanks for everything that you're doing. This is not an easy time, if ever there was one, it to be in the House, but also the work that you and your House colleagues are doing is so important. It will be, I think, a mystery for the ages that our country got to the point that something like funding for expanded testing, to take one example, was viewed as a democratic priority versus just common sense. But as long as we are in fact in that world, we're so lucky that you're there serving not just your constituents from New Jersey, but really serving this whole country by helping better decisions be reached. And of course, I'm excited to support you, partly because I know that Nicole and Michael are on your side, and a friend of theirs is a friend of mine, and they say that you can tell a lot about folks by the company they keep. We are in excellent company tonight, so big thank you to everybody on the host committee, and especially to Nicole and Michael for everything that you do. I'll be brief because I know we've got such a great group of friends and leaders on the call with questions, and I think we can have a great conversation. I just want to offer a few reflections, and the first is why it's so important that we're all here to support Josh, and so important that he goes back to Washington. The presidency is commanding more attention than ever, obviously, because it's on fire. But this is also a moment more than ever where we're seeing just how important other offices are. State and local offices that I'm a big believer in investing in, and the House. Imagine the situation we would be in were it not for the House majority. And I actually think that among the House majority, it is leaders like Josh who have a bipartisan problem-solving instinct who will be the most important to us finding a way out of the mess we're in when we retake the White House. It will simply not be enough to retake the White House. Necessary, but not sufficient. And in a moment like this, that really is going to call for a level of imagination that hasn't been displayed in Washington since probably the days of the New Deal, if not before that. We're really going to need those kinds of instincts that I know you are bringing to the table every day. As frankly, even though we can't get ahead of ourselves with the urgent work of the next 99 days, I'm starting to think a little bit about what the Republican Party will become. And I think your instincts for finding the best in people who are on the other side of the aisle as they go through the reckoning that I think will be required of them in order to figure out what they're going to be in the post-Trump era is so important. But first, we got to make sure there is a post-Trump era and that it comes sooner rather than later. And that support is critically important. And in a district like yours and in all of these key races, and that's what everybody on this line is supporting. So I'm so thankful for that. I think that if the election were held today, we would be in fantastic shape. But the election's not being held today. And if there's anything we've learned in the last few months, it's how much can change in a few months. And I think we would be mistaken to believe that things are going to look like they do right now in the 3 months and change that separate us from Election Day in November. I would be on guard for a national security event of some kind of world historical proportion. I hope I'm wrong, but I think we ought to be ready for it. We should be ready for the consequences of the continued really rickety approach on the Senate side toward even the basics of having the economy on life support. And we need to be ready, of course, for the headwinds that we're facing just in terms of the way the elections themselves are being run. Something that is subject to a combination of voter suppression and more perhaps well-intentioned but no less problematic issues like the sheer shortage that we're likely to run into of poll workers, given that our elections, more than we'd like to admit, are basically run by volunteer retirees in those critical poll worker slots by the tens of thousands across the country. And we're not going to have as many as we expected unless we mobilize on the front end to make sure we fill those seats. So there is a lot of work to do just to make sure the mechanics of the elections go well. And on top of that, we've got to make sure that we're out there with a winning message. It's never enough just to say that the other guy's terrible, even when it's true. We've got to make sure that we're creating a sense of what we're actually for, what we're going to build. It's one of the reasons I appreciate the vice president's terminology when he says build back better. This isn't just build back exactly the way it was. This is build back a better economy, a better future. And a lot of the propulsion out of that is going to come from the House side, where Congressman Gottheimer and his colleagues are serving right now with that, again, vital bipartisan instinct for pragmatism and problem solving. I think a lot of times pragmatism and boldness are set off as being sort of opposite of each other. I think right now pragmatism is going to lead to boldness because the solutions, just in the simple practicality of what it's going to take to solve the problems, they're going to be incredibly demanding, and they're going to require a level of imagination that recognizes that the decisions we're making just in the next 6 to 18 months as a country are really going to be decisions about what the next decade is going to look like. And I know that you're attuned to that, and I know you have the turn of mind that makes it possible to rise to meet that moment. So there's a lot of good news in terms of how things might be shaping up, but we can't take our eye off the ball at all, especially because of one other paradox I think going on right now, which is, well, the work of the House and other offices has never been more important. There's never been less attention to those critically important offices and the work that's going on there, because so much is being devoured by the presidency and the presidential election. And I got to know most of you by way of the presidential election. Obviously, I believe it's critically important, but we can't fall down on making sure that we're dealing with the full spectrum here, and that's what we have a chance to do tonight. So I'm really excited to be with you. Thrilled to be supporting you, and I know again we got a great lively group of people. So I think unless somebody redirects me, I'm going to go right into our Q&A. And I think we had a few questions prepared in advance to get the ball rolling. And the first is from Glenn Kerner. So Glenn, if you could unmute yourself, we will turn to you to kick off our conversation.
I will. Thank you very much. Thanks to both Congressman and to you, Mayor Pete, for being here and spending the time with us today. As the folks here in the district know, our district is mixed. It's conservative, liberal, progressive, Republican, independent, Democratic. And Josh's victory in 2016 was huge. He's done a great job as a problem solver and being bipartisan and fostering bipartisanship in the House on a lot of different issues, including the economy. And as we look at the upcoming election in November, we see that the president has pretty poor poll numbers across the board, most issues, if not all issues. But the one issue that he's still hanging in there, he's still doing well, maybe leading a little bit in some polls, and if not leading, at least close behind, and that's the economy. And that's despite the huge unemployment numbers that we're seeing, and of course the continued pandemic. So the question is, what do Josh and you say to the voters here in this district about why the Democrats and Josh are better equipped to handle the economy going forward during these unprecedented times?
Josh, why don't you go ahead? I'd love to hear the perspective from your constituency, and then I'll
What do you mean?
start.
I was going to get free counsel here. What do you mean? Glenn, it's a great question, and I've talked about this a little bit. I mean, if you look historically at who's better at both being fiscally responsible when we need to be, and then actually stepping up and helping people when it's essential, it's the Democrats. And if you actually look at the numbers of who's created more jobs historically, it's the Democrats, and our legacy is pretty rich there. Just on the job creation, if you just do the job creation number, who's better? We've been better. Now I think it's how we talk, and I think what's important now more than anything, given that we're facing the crisis that we're facing, is the president has, one of the many ways he's failed is being compassionate about and empathetic about what people are going through. And you have a lot of people in New Jersey, we've got a higher than 15% unemployment rate right now. And so a lot of people are out of work and they're scared about what the future holds because none of us know. And every week there's new surprises and folks just want to get back to work, but there might not be a lot of jobs to get back to. I think it's up to us, and this is where the legislation we passed out of the House actually gets people's backs, whether it's through unemployment insurance to help them through this period, or whether it's been a direct payment to help them through this period, or being understanding about childcare issues and what they're facing. So I think we need to keep, in my opinion, when I talk to folks back home, it's being cognizant of what people are going through and being there for them and saying, here are the tools we're going to give you to help you get through this really difficult time and to make sure the jobs are there on the other side. It's not just a health crisis, right, that we've gone through, and obviously we got hit, as you know, Glenn, so hard early in our district, but it's the economic crisis, and to not be understanding of what it's done to all these small businesses. 22% of restaurants in New Jersey are out. They're not coming back, right? That's a scary thing. That's a lot of jobs with those restaurants. You think about how many service jobs have been affected. A lot of us are able to work from home, but a lot of folks can't. And I think we have to say to them, here's the bridge we're going to give you. The other side is doing everything possible right now to stand in the way of helping. They were there in the beginning, and then they decided, well, this, early on, well, this doesn't really affect my state, so I'm out. And which I couldn't believe. And now, of course, many of the same people who walked away are facing it in their districts. So what I talk to people about is we're going to be there. We're going to help you through this, both economically. We're going to help our small businesses with PPP, and I think we should do more on that. And we're also going to make sure our doctors, our nurses, our frontline health workers also have what they need, and then we're thinking about it. Last point I'll make, and I'll turn it over to Pete. we have to show that we're ahead of the curve and we're thinking down the line here. Up until 3 weeks ago, the largest manufacturer of needles and syringes in the country, BD, Beck & Dickinson, which is right down the road, Glenn, from where you live, right, in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, produces 80% of the syringes and needles in the United States, right, every year, hadn't received an order until 3 weeks ago, hadn't received an order for needles and syringes. We will probably need somewhere around 700 million. It takes them about 10 months to produce that many. And the government gave one order out to the player that makes 5% of all the needles and syringes. And guess what? It's a donor, shocking, of the administrations. And all these other countries have put their orders in. We still haven't put in we've only put in for 50 million. Just to give you a sense, we have to show that we are prepared. We're the ones who are on top of our game, and they're playing games.
It's so important. And, I think we've been thinking so much about getting through the week or the month, or, whether we're going to reopen on Tuesday or something, but that mentality of projecting even just a few months out is part of how we're going to deal with this. I think part of what you're saying that's so important is this idea that the economy doesn't get better until the public health picture does. Austin Goolsbee, who's a Obama White House advisor, an important part of our campaign, always said the first rule of virus economics is that the economy doesn't get better until you do something about the virus. And I think we're seeing that now. I think you're right that there continues to be this kind of frustrating public perception that Glenn's talking about that often favors the president. At the same time, I think people are increasingly able to boil down kind of the economy and the abstract to what's actually affecting them. I apologize for any toggle sound effects going on here with Cheston's. Had to step out of the house, so you might hear him guarding the realm. So, we've got to make sure that we do what Democrats do best, which is render the economy not in terms of just the ups and downs of the stock market, but how's your life going right now? Are you going to have enough to make rent? Is everybody going to have enough to get through the next month? I mean, the numbers like the 22% that Josh just cited is a hair-raising number, and it means we're in for a really rocky ride. As he said, we also shouldn't be afraid to take more credit for this, right? The job creation under all that President Trump managed to do was inherit the Obama recovery and not screw it up for the first 3 years, which is, I suppose, something. But the kind of devil's bargain that he was promising up until March was, tolerate all of the chaos and division, and in return, I'll get you job growth that's a little slower than Obama did. That's all that it amounted to, and we can't let him get away with that. Let alone now, where all of this is just academic, unless we actually get on top of an issue that, by the way, other countries have demonstrated that human beings can get ahead of in terms of containing the effects of this pandemic, but only if you have leadership that responds to evidence, that coordinates with the private and public sectors, that respects what local leaders are saying, that can coordinate with the rest of the world. If we don't have that now, we're never going to stand a chance of being competitive in the worst situations that are likely to face us in the near future economically. Lastly, I'm just glad you mentioned fiscal responsibility too. I talked about this constantly on the campaign. We got to puncture this myth that one party has a monopoly on fiscal responsibility, because actually it's only on our watch that the deficit has gotten better. Literally 100% of the presidencies in my lifetime, it has been on our watch that the deficit has been smaller at the end than at the beginning of that presidency. So we shouldn't shy away from it. It's one of many reasons why I'm supporting Josh's campaign, because he has the instinct to express that vocabulary where some of our friends in the Democratic Party, I think, do get wrapped around the axle trying to talk about the economy and allow what I believe is a very undeserved partisan advantage to build up on the other side.
Pete, the best part of the fiscal responsibility joke that they've tried to sow here is, if you look at the tax hike bill of 2017, I call it the tax hike bill because if you live in Jersey or New York in our areas, you got hosed, right? And some of the moocher states who just take took everything, and SALT, the state and local tax deduction, which they gutted, sent our taxes up. So when people try to claim, Glenn, right, I hear this all the time, well, Trump took care of us, the stock market, which is their barometer, which can evaporate in a day, as we saw. I say, wait a second, he raised your taxes. So, and he added $2 trillion to the deficit, right? I mean, they claimed everything would balance out. If you look at the numbers, it's not balanced out at all. It's created a massive hole. It's left many of us in SALT states with higher taxes. So I don't know, that doesn't seem so fiscally responsible or much of an economic a benefit that they've given us.
Well said. And some of your commentary earlier about the economy leads well to this next question. So let's see if Rosina Rubin is on the line.
Hi.
Hello.
I love, Mayor Pete, what you said about pragmatism leading to boldness. I'm a small business owner, and I think I'm going to borrow it from you and hang it on the wall.
Rosina, I already stole it and put it into an ad in the last half hour.
I'm interested, Congressman Gottheimer, in your perspective as the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus as to what we might realistically see for small businesses in the coming aid package. Particularly, might there be a second PPP loan available for businesses who have lost more than 50% in revenue? Will Congress codify tax deductibility of PPP expenditures so that most of us don't end up with huge tax bills, even if we do everything right to have our loans forgiven? And will the PPP be expanded to include allowance to spend on PPE so that small businesses with little revenue, particularly those in hospitality and retail, don't have to weigh the safety of employees and customers against budgetary concerns? And might there be some limited liability protection for small businesses who are doing their best to make the workplace safe?
Well, that's a lot, so I'll try to tick through it fast. And I'm really glad you asked about that, because I think it's one of the things I've been pushing very hard for in the last weeks is a second round of PPP. I think it's essential for businesses, small businesses that, as you just pointed out, need it, who've been hit on the revenue line. So you have to prove you have to show that you've had an impact. And I think it's really important that there's a lot more transparency and accountability, oversight over it, because many of us were pushing for full disclosure, and disclosure was limited, which I think is outrageous. I really think there should be full disclosure. But I think we're going to get a deal done around PPP. I think the Treasury Secretary has indicated that he agrees. He was testifying a couple weeks ago before my committee and asked him this directly, and he supports another round, which is good because that will make it easier for it to happen. And I also pushed with others for a 60-40 split versus the initial 75-25, because I thought there should be more dollars to help pay for non-employee expenditures like rent and others. And I think PPE, as you pointed out, should be part of that basket. And I also agree with you on the deductibility perspective. And I'm concerned. I want to give you a whole new onerous tax bill for what you're going through. And what I want to see happen is actually businesses survive and get through this. The whole point of the PPP program was to help you get through this and to keep the jobs, right? That was our goal. Let's get through this and keep the jobs. And we did it in a week, which meant it wasn't perfect. And we've been trying to tweak it ever since and make it better. And it's gotten better. But I think we can make it even better. The last point on liability, I think that something will be in this bill with some safe harbors. That's a big point of contention, what that language will actually say, how far it goes. But you want to make sure that if businesses like yours hit certain standards and give certain protections and have certain protections, that you have obviously certain protections too. That said, the problem is the administration, of course, hasn't set any standards yet for what's required. So that makes it difficult for you to achieve certain objectives if it's unclear which objectives we should follow and which protections we should follow. So, there's no OSHA guidelines yet, and there's CDC guidelines, but no OSHA guidelines. So I think we've got work to do there. But I'm glad that you raised that question, because I think we've got to do everything possible to help you get through this. Pete?
All right. Sorry, I was trying to mute the toggle.
That's okay. The dog agrees.
Home is well defended. So just real quick, I want to toss to you for a second before we go to the next question, though, because I know you've also been outspoken about needing to make sure that there is the right kind of oversight now that we have a second round, and making sure that this is confidence building in the way that the tax dollars are being spent. Can you talk about a little bit about what it's going to take in order to deliver that, and why you thought it was important to foreground that?
why it's been challenging, as I said.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple reasons why there hasn't been more disclosure. You know, there's certain disclosure required depending on how big the loan is, and then under a certain amount, and that number has moved, is about $150,000 now. That Treasury has issued different guidelines on this disclosure. We tried to actually, with a guy named Dean Phillips and I, help with a piece of legislation about a month ago, saying that everything should be disclosed of every size loan, both who got the loan, why they needed the loan, so all the information that you should expect to see if there's any conflicts of interest or what the reasoning is. We're also, many of us, concerned that certain companies took loans that didn't really need it or had other sources of opportunity for loans, but they didn't take them. The way we wrote the law, it's not as if nobody, people didn't violate the law, but they followed the law. But the bottom line is, I think the transparency is essential to understand and to ensure that people are accountable. Pete, the biggest issue we think is that there's a lot of people who took loans who, might be related to members of Congress, or have other conflicts of interest, and they just don't want it out there. And I think there was enough of them that they were able to, frankly, stop the vote. And that's what happened, we believe, on that piece of legislation.
It's really helpful context just from the inside. By the way, feel free, folks, to enter into the chat if you have questions as we go, and we'll field them. Ira's got the next question. Ira, over to you.
Hi, Pete. Thank you, and hi,
Hey,
Josh.
Hey, Ira.
Great to see you. Hi there. Great to see you. Thank you, Nicole and Michael as well. So let me read the question. So, how would both of you address in this current politically and socially conscious environment the recent dramatic and disturbing increase of overtly anti-Semitic rhetoric and social media postings, many that even invoke the name of Adolf Hitler, being done by major athletes, entertainment personalities, organization leaders, including recently the head of the Philadelphia NAACP. The lack of real apologies, the at best minimal coverage on any news outlet, silence from political leaders, including in our party as well, and most of all, zero consequences in to be a complete double standard when it comes to the outrage of intolerances. So that's what my question is.
Yeah, for my part, and I know Josh has been a leader on a lot of this, so I look forward to his perspective. But it's been really alarming. The Philadelphia piece that you mentioned you had to see it to believe it, and then you can't unsee it. This is something that unfortunately has really reared its, this kind of anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head in both parties. There have been a lot of issues on our side of the aisle, and we've got to make clear that this is a bipartisan rejection. I think one of the reasons why groups like the Problem Solvers Caucus that Josh helps to lead and the bipartisan energy that does exist, even while the parties are so frighteningly far apart on a lot of things, is that it really should be, in this case, something that can be unequivocally said in a way that makes clear that this has nothing to do with where you are politically. It's just a basic American human norm that we are vocally and ferociously opposed to any of these kinds of expressions of anti-Semitism. So, I think a lot of it's naming it, a lot of it's speaking out about it, but the more we can decouple speaking out about these issues. I mean, there's a whole other conversation we had, right, about the welcoming of white nationalists and sometimes card-carrying anti-Semites in this White House. But the reality is this is not an issue that we should think of as a concern with one party. This is something that we've got to be on the lookout for at every corner of the American political spectrum.
That's very well put. I would just add that, and Ira, I really appreciate the question, because to me, there's a couple layers here. The overall hate that has seeped into the veins of our country in a way that I frankly don't think was unleashed in the way it is today a couple years ago. I think we all see it and we all feel it. And I don't care if you're Jewish or not, you see it. And it's one of the most upsetting things is just what you look at your social media page on a given day. And Pete, I'm sure you had plenty of this. and so get it of just how much hate is out there and what people feel it's okay to say, as you know, in ways that if I said any of those things, you know, I would have been sent to the shed. And I can't believe that people feel so comfortable expressing such hatred toward so many people. I don't care if they're gay or Muslim or Jewish, that people just say what they want. And the white supremacy issues are naked in a way that they haven't been in decades now. Of course, they were there, but just not, people feel comfortable. And I think this administration has made them feel more comfortable to say and do what they want. And, you know, in my first campaign, I remember how upset I was by the first swastika lawn sign. And then it became kind of normal. There were a lot of them. And then in the next campaign, there was a big supporter of mine in the rural part of my district, woke up one morning with a big swastika on her garage because she had my lawn sign up. And what got me through it was that she called me and said, "Bring me another lawn sign." And it's sort of the courage that people have through all this. It's pretty remarkable. On the anti-Semitism stuff, here's what I believe. I believe that a lot of people on the other side of the aisle are trying to, unfortunately, use this issue as a wedge to make it that a lot of Democrats are no longer good on U.S. Israel or toward Jews. And listen, we have folks in our party who, you know, that I've done a little battle with on these issues. But if you've done the vast majority of people in the Democratic Party are not only are their values right, not only are they great on U.S. Israel, but in general, but they have done more to fight anti-Semitism and hate across the board than anyone else. So I think we need to just remind people that, and not let hate be used as a wedge issue in this election. So you know, I keep standing up and fighting for that, but I know it's a very frustrating thing on a daily basis.
Thanks, and you're so right. A lot of this has been there all along, but it's being brought to light in a new way, and that just creates new obligations for all of us, I think, and certainly everyone in positions of leadership to respond. Okay, we got a question now from Larry Linden on climate.
Hi, Mayor Pete and Josh, great to see you, and thank you, Nicole and Michael, for organizing this. My question's on climate change. And so Vice President Biden has got a strategy for dealing with it. The challenge is that we have three, what I would call kitchen table crises right now. We have COVID, we have the economic downturn, and we have, you know, all these new revelations about historical and current injustice, racial injustice. And those are very present, and they're right now, and they're kitchen table issues. They hurt people in their daily lives. And then we have climate change, which is a slowly accumulating problem that is, you know, noticeable now, will be pretty bad in 10 years, and in 30 years will be extremely catastrophic and more or less irreversible. So Vice President Biden is sort of commingling these in a way that he's been very explicit about under his Build Back Better phraseology that Mayor Pete, you mentioned. On the other hand, it isn't necessarily that popular in frontline districts like yours, Josh. So I wonder, I'd be interested in your commentary about what we have to do now in the next few months and after the election and next year to keep these things all bundled, if you agree in that strategy, and I do, and get this, what'll be a historical, you know, FDR level package that he's proposing.
Pete, you want to start there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for us, I think, you know, experience taught us that it's always about connecting it to things that people can see and feel, right? If this seems like it's about a far off, distant thing that's going on the polls, it's always going to seem like a lower priority, even for people who are sympathetic. And it's never going to win out when it's pitted against immediate concerns about jobs in the economy. But this is about jobs in the economy, and not just in a far off way, right? The solution side can create so much opportunity. And so much of that opportunity is actually in many of these kind of knife edge swing districts and in communities from the so-called Rust Belt to communities that we were visiting in the campaign in places like New Hampshire, Iowa, that were on the forefront of creating a lot of jobs that we may have made a mistake in terms of making them sound really newfangled, the so-called green collar jobs, when so many of them are also blue collar jobs. They're very understandable. We're talking about union carpenters and electrical workers and insulators and stuff that people can understand, that we're going to need more of in order to achieve the kind of retrofits and infrastructure upgrades that the vice president talks about, in order to have any chance of meeting the goals that the IPCC tells us we've got more or less exactly 10 years to get done, or we really are going off a cliff and there's just no return. So I think the more we can create an immediate kind of visceral picture of what the upside looks like on the job creation front, we shouldn't be afraid to talk about the downside in stark terms too. Whether it was the Sandy experience or the floods we went through here in a very much an inland city where I live. There's no part of the country that's immune to these effects. I think we have to be ready to talk about that. I think the other thing that I found was very powerful when we were in, again, more conservative pockets where we were campaigning when I was running for president, is to make sure that people are thinking about the next generation of people that they love and care about, and their responsibility to make sure that their lives go well too. The very same things that motivate people to be very suspicious of anything that looks like it's going to undermine their economic way of life. These are also the same motivations if we challenge them the same way, the right way, channel them the right way, I should say, that make it possible to just activate a kind of moral sensibility that I think all of us have or feel when somebody from a younger generation looks you in the eye and asks what you're doing to keep them safe.
Matt, Pete, I think you put that perfectly, and especially point of the future. And I think I know, and sitting down with Larry many times, I think that's what you care about more than anything, is making sure that it's okay for tomorrow. But I think that first point you made is exactly right, which is you have to make it practical for people for now, because talking about the future, everyone cares about their kids, but it's seeing the challenge, and grandkids, but seeing what you're going to do about it right now. And now in God's country in New Jersey, we have a lot of environmental challenges, as we always had, whether that's people who've dumped, we've got, a real history of cleanup sites that we've had to deal with. And then you've got Sandy and huge coastal flooding issues, and drilling. There's so many environmental issues packed into a small space that as a result, people really care about the environment, Democrats and Republicans. And I've actually found that if you make it practical about clean water and getting lead out of the drinking water and making sure that people aren't drilling offshore and messing with beaches or dumping, waste from out of state, and really dealing with it and dealing with climate change, but in very practical here and now terms, because they want to be able to breathe the air and not see smog when they wake up in the morning, right? Those things are all, they all lead to actually doing something about climate right now, and it helps in the long run. The truth is the coastal flooding issue, not just Sandy and Larry, we've talked about this, but it's only a couple years away where the Jersey Shore is going to be underwater. It's not that far away, or lower Manhattan, right? So these are real practical things. And then you say to people, that shore house you really like, or that property you bought, that you spend a lot of money in, that you want to give to your kids. Well, guess what? It's not going to be there. So either you do something about this now, or 10 years from now, you will have no property. So it's up to you. And then you point to Sandy and say, remember how you lost everything overnight? Oh, and the insurance companies didn't cover for a lot of that. So you're out of pocket. It's a great way to appeal to those who are more focused on their pocketbook than maybe the environment. And I have found that to be really successful in talking and getting Republicans, not just Democrats, who reflexively, of course, care about the issue and should care about the issue.
Well said. All right, next we have Lizanne with a question on education.
Hey, Lizanne.
Oh, I wonder if you're on mute. Lizanne, you're on mute. Oh, now you're definitely on mute. Oh, keeps flipping back to try one more time.
There.
Okay, it says you're not on mute, but we still can't hear you. Try again.
It says you're on mute.
It has the system has you unmuted, but we can't We can't hear you. Let me give you a minute to see if you can sort that, and in the meantime, go to Libby. Is Libby there?
Hi, how are you? Sorry, I am here.
Hi, Libby.
Hi, Libby.
Hi, how are you doing? Congressman, I commend you, for working across the aisle, staying true to your progressive values, but not letting perfection be the enemy of progress. So thank you. And saying
Libby, it's called pragmatic boldness.
I know. We can be progressive, but we can also be practical, right? So going back to your tagline, which is, Jersey values, low taxes, just a question about the SALT deduction. I know that you've been a champion for the reinstatement of that this Congress. If there is a Democratic sweep, realistically, just given the expense of it, do you see that getting into a fiscal package? I know that this sort of seems, like it's kind of self-interested for all of us on the Zoom, but really it is important for big states from a tax erosion perspective and ensuring that these big blue states have money to provide services to those who are less fortunate. So even though it might seem self-interested, it's a really important question. And then also on sort of the corporate tax rate, this is former Vice President Biden has put out his proposal of a 28% corporate tax rate. Just sort of seeing, again, practically and realistically where you think that might land. Again, should there be a Democratic sweep and should we see a big fiscal package in 2021?
So I think great questions. Pete, okay if I go first? Okay. So I was going to say is, one, on SALT, I think the argument, and it's why I was included in the HEROES Act, which was our most recent CARES package on the Democratic side out of Congress. Why did we reinstate it for a period of time? Because it's critical to get dollars back into the pockets of people so they can spend it and get the economy moving. It's been as you know, a huge hit to many of the bluer states, to the SALT states, a huge economic hit. It's affected property values. It's affected, at the end of the day, dollars in your pocket to spend. So it's also double taxation, and you all know the arguments for why I think it's outrageous that we gutted the state and local tax deduction. I think the practical reality is we may not get all of it back, but I think it'll get significantly raised, the cap. I will, of course, and many of us will push for the whole thing. I think in the negotiation, if we're being realistic, it may be that it's tripled versus, say it's 30,000 versus 10,000. But I think in the short run, we may get all of it back, and then it may wean off a little bit. That's what I've talked to many colleagues about. Although, if you ask me, we're going to keep pushing for the whole thing. And again, it's really dollars that will go back in. It is double taxation. There's a very good argument for why it should be fully reinstated. So that's what I think. Now, the other question you asked about was,
It's just the corporate tax rate.
Oh, the corporate tax rate. So the corporate tax rate. I think it'll get. I'm someone who you said you saw my signs. They say lower taxes, Jersey values. Everyone who's from Jersey knows what a Jersey value is around here. So I don't have to explain that to you, Pete. You'll have to hang out in Jersey with me for a few minutes.
All right, you can educate me.
I'll take you to a diner. You'll learn a Jersey value. But the lower taxes piece, I don't think we should be, flexibly raising taxes right now. I think if the odds are that if something does get raised, it would be in the corporate side, not the personal side, I believe. I don't know what the number would ultimately be. It really depends, but I know that's what the vice president has introduced at this point.
I just want to mention one thing. It's really helpful context and inside perspective. The SALT issue is also an example of the importance of just listening to local leaders. The U.S. Conference of Mayors was really fired up about this when they proposed it. And, we're seeing in a different way the terrible consequences of ignoring what local leaders have to say when it comes to the pandemic. I'm old enough to remember when conservatives were really focused on local control and honoring the local. Now you've seen it go as far in Georgia as the governor suing to block mayors from being able to enact public health guidelines to make sure people are protected from the virus. It's really upside down. And one of the things I noticed that Josh has been doing is bipartisan summits of mayors, something that our member of Congress hasn't done. I wish that had happened, because you really need federal officials who take what mayors have to say seriously. And if you're in, and it's one of the reasons also I'm so glad the House caucus right now in terms of the CARES Act and the pandemic relief is thinking about the impact on state and local budgets just from what's going on right now, because so many cities are down to muscle and bone. I mean, we're talking about do we cut the fire department or do we cut restaurant inspections? Like, where do we go? There's not a lot of fluff in there, and so that kind of mentality that's really got an ear to the ground is really important. Okay, next up, Chris.
Jump down that. Yeah. Like, I think it's a phenomenal point you're making about mayors, and I just from where I sit, and it's I got 70 of my mayors in my district, and it's the place I go for feedback on everything, because they're the ones on the ground every single day talking to folks, and that's where you actually know. That's my best way of knowing when an issue surfaces. When there's a problem, the mayor texts me and says, "We got a problem here. We have an issue here." And your point about the state and local dollars, we've had a $20 billion hole in Jersey from COVID. Throughout just until recently, we had half the caseload between New York and New Jersey, and as a result, huge budget gaps. Now, a lot of the local communities were the ones are feeling the brunt of it. Because people aren't able to pay their mortgages, they're not getting property tax dollars, so therefore they're not able to pay their school bills, right? Because 60% of the dollar you pay to your property taxes goes to your school in a lot of cases, and so they can't pay their bills to the schools, and then they can't pay for the firefighters and all these other essential services. If we don't get in this next package, then I put up a bill that with Senator Menendez and a bipartisan bill in the Senate and in the House. And with Mr. Reed from New York, that does $500 billion. It's called the SMART Act, $500 billion for state and locals. And the key is that it's able to get to every size community, because in the first CARES Act, we used several formulas that prevented some size communities from getting dollars, which you might imagine for rural communities really upset a lot of mayors and a lot of folks. So we fixed this in this package, which I think is really, really important.
It's great. That's the kind of problem solving that warms this mayor's heart. So thanks for having your ear to the ground that way. All right, I think we got time for one more question. So we'll go to Chris Mayer with a question on voting rights.
Hello, Mayor Pete and Josh.
Hey, Chris.
Big supporter, and the work you've done. SALT, infrastructure, anti-hate are all really critical and important issues. My question for you, Mayor, was how worried are you about, the reports, not necessarily in New Jersey, but states, particularly with Republican governors, where we may see efforts to not have people vote, have lines in urban locations, make it harder for Democrats to have their voices heard in the process. I'll also sort of get in a question for Josh on the negotiations, as it looks more and more like the $600 is going to be hard. There are many millions, estimates are a couple more million renters in particular who aren't getting help, who may face huge problems paying their rent if we go to $200 or less on the unemployment supplement. And so I maybe give each of you a question that are important issues to worry about.
Great. Josh, you want to take up the unemployment piece?
Sure. I think you're right that $600 is going to be difficult. What number we land on, I don't know yet. I think the direct dollars I think they're willing to do the direct payments, because I think they believe that sending a check home to everyone right before the election is good politics, and they'll pretty much admit that. So that's why they're so quick to jump on board on that. But their argument is that small businesses, right, people aren't going back to work because it's too much money. We have to, and you're spot on, Chris, that to not come up with a more comprehensive solution that is realistic by the fact that people can't pay their rents right now. If you talk to landlords in New Jersey, commercial and residential, people have stopped paying. As of July, people have stopped paying. I mean, in all of our major malls, only 30% are paying their rents every month, including the major chains. And then in mixed-use housing and all of our developments, you're at around 30 to 40%. People don't have the dollars, and the idea that we're going to suddenly think the economy is going to be okay if we unplug them completely and you have no resources, not only to pay their rent, but to put food on the table, it's a joke. And your point about, and the point which I think is also really important, if I can just jump in on the election piece, I'm very concerned with what's going to go on between now and election day to try to both intimidate and interfere and drive down turnout and infuse confusion and to try to do anything we can to undermine the election. And by the way, it's not just domestically with local governments, it's also watching Russia and China and Iran and others at work. I've done a lot of work on social media and going after terror online, but I'm also going after, and white supremacy online, but also I'm going after interference with elections, which we've been going after, which we introduced the beginning of Congress, and somehow that is not a priority for this administration, interfering in elections and messing with our elections. I get very fired up about this because I can't believe that anyone would not do, that any president would do everything humanly possible to stop interference from a foreign government in our elections. No less what we're going to have to deal with domestically to interfere with our elections. And on that positive note, I'll turn it over to Pete.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right to be concerned, and I think we all need to pay really close attention to this. First of all, the foreign interference where Russian activity continues, it's gotten more sophisticated because they've learned from their last round. China's really interested in emulating the Russian approach. We're seeing indications of that. And meanwhile, right here at home, we got tons of problems, voter suppression, patchwork of approaches and policies here in Indiana, trying to get vote by mail. We need to do two things at once, too. This is really important to, I think, bear in mind from an advocacy perspective. We need to make sure everybody has a way to safely vote from home, and we need to make sure everybody has a way to safely vote in person. In other words, we need to make sure as many people as possible can vote by mail. But in states that haven't had a past pattern of vote by mail, a lot of people will get left out if there's not also a robust way to go in person and make sure that it's safe. Especially some of the most marginalized communities, more likely to be Black voters, low-income voters, voters of color generally, who often have the most at stake. And so we've got to be very vocal. It's one of the reasons why Win the Era, my organization, is teaming up with efforts like Fair Fight that Stacey Abrams' group has done a fantastic job of just shining a light on these issues. And let's remember, Election Day is actually really earlier than ever this year. I mean, by October, we're well into the election because Election Day is about a month long in many cases. Now, on the back end, we're going to have an almost opposite problem, which is that I think about someone like Donald Trump. Either he will win or he will say that he was cheated out of winning, right? Those are the only two things that could happen. So in the event where he and others lose, it is very likely they will try to attack the legitimacy of the elections. And we've got to make sure that we're standing up for the integrity of the system. First of all, on the front end, so as much as possible, it's beyond reproach. But also on the back end, where there are likely to be more spurious claims of voter fraud or other measures to try to cast doubt on defeats. It's, you know, one of the things I'm reminding folks of is don't assume that we're going to have the results on election night. Look, after our Iowa experience, I am as attuned as anybody to how frustrating that is not to get the votes on election night. But in a lot of states, not even allowed to touch the absentee ballots until the moment polls close. And if we have millions more absentee ballots or mail-in ballots across the country than before, it may take a couple days or more to process, and that may actually be a good sign in terms of people using the vote by mail option and officials trying to handle this with integrity. So this is an incredibly complex problem. It's incredibly important that we stay on top of it. And above all, it's important that we re-elect members of Congress like Josh, because the long-term answers for this, of course, are not something we should all be having to figure out one election at a time, to actually reform the system, as H.R. 1 sought to do, and other pro-democracy, anti-corruption efforts that have often passed already in the House, only to die in the Senate. Finally get the day in the sun that they deserve when we have, we hope, a new White House and Senate for the House to partner with. I know we're drawing up against our time, so again, I just want to thank everybody who's part of this. It's such a great group, feels kind of like a reunion, and so pleased that we were able to come together because for me at least, it just is a relief, especially anywhere in the kind of political space to just have a conversation where we have our heads down, we're talking about getting stuff done. And that mentality about getting stuff done, you can tell that it propels Josh Gottheimer just as it propels every mayor. And this is what it's actually going to take to get past all of the noise and actually solve problems. And those are the kinds of leaders that we need and that I want in Washington. So Josh, I'll kick it back over to you for the last word, but thanks for the chance to join you today. And thanks to everybody for bringing us together for such an important cause.
Well, I can't thank future President Buttigieg enough for your incredible leadership, there's a great reason why you have a huge following and why people love you. It's actually really practical and clearly brilliant, but more than anything, inspiring. And so I'm fired up. You've got me fired up. We've got a very big election ahead. And I want to thank everybody for being part of today. And Michael and Nikki, thank you so much for doing this and for just being, of course, great friends since I was 12. Which thank you for reminding that. And now that I'm 20, I just can't believe it. But thank you all. And BJ, I see you there too. That's Nikki's brother, who we have to call Ben now. BJ all growing up, but he's fancy now. We have to call him Ben. I just really want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for helping me. We've got a lot of work to do. It's going to be a tough fight, as you know, in my district. I've got a self-funder who is, it took us 84 years to win this seat in 2016. We don't want to lose it. So he spent $1 million in his primary. He committed to spending at least $5 million of his own money in the general. So it's going to be a fight, as it always is. But I'm ready, and I'm very lucky to have all of you behind me because it's going to take it. And we've got to not only have to keep the House, I think we can pick up some seats if we do a good job. But remember, we've got 31 Trump districts and only a 17-seat lead. So let's not get fooled into complacency for 2 minutes. They'll take it from us as quickly as they give it to us. And I don't just mean on election day. I mean between now. They, as Pete said, they will come up with everything. They do not like to lose, and they have no problem playing whatever game they need to play to win. And they'll do the same thing in the Senate, and they're going to do the same thing up top. So it's up to us to make sure we're vigilant, we work our asses off, and we win big. So that's what I'm going to be focused on. And I'm just beyond grateful to have all of you. And Pete, I can't thank you enough for giving us your time and your insights today. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good job.